Hi, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be doing the build video of the FT3D. Now, if you haven't seen the project or the review of the FT3D, Aaron Bates was a really instrumental key to the success of this airplane. It does all your basic 3D maneuvers, and it's also incredibly durable. Now, before you start the build with the FT3D, you do need to build your power pod first. There's a link below with step-by-step instructions and the plans for your power pod. Once you've gotten that built, go ahead and get the rest of your parts cut out for your FT3D, and we'll get started. Our first step in the build of the FT3D will be to build the wings. Now, this wing is very unique and is different from all the other ones because it actually is a full symmetrical wing. To get started, we're going to do some same steps as we did before though. We're going to cut a double bevel, just like we've done on the Baby Blender and the FT Bloody Wonder in the very front, and of course we're going to bevel our ailerons. Now, you're welcome to use a nice sharp number 11 X-Acto knife, or you can actually sand a bevel. Now we're going to cut our double bevel. Make sure that you go 2 lines in to the middle line. You don't want to cut your bevel on one of these other lines. So if you can see, you have 5 lines total. The third one in the middle is the one you want to cut the double bevel on. And we'll repeat the process on the other side. Now that we have our bevels cut for our leading edge and our aileron, our next step is to take, if this is a speed build kit, it's going to actually have a 50% score cut into it, or if you're going on the plans, they're actually referenced as blue lines, I believe, and that just means a lightly crease with a straight edge. So what you're going to want to do on either one, simply put a crease right down that line. You don't have to try to make a gap in there, but you just want to give it a point to fold in on. Now on the speed build kit, what this does is it actually folds the paper in on itself just a little bit. It's incredibly important when you glue your spars on that you line up the outer edge perfectly. If it's shifted slightly to the left or right, your wing will not come out symmetrical. Take our hot glue gun. I like to kind of slide it back and forth a little bit to smear that glue around, and then go ahead and just keep an eye on one reference line to the best of your abilities. And once you got it to where you like it, check your other side. Our next step with this is to carefully lift up. Now on the speed build kits, this is going to be very easy. Take your time when you're scratch building this. All of our plans were scratch built before they ever became laser cut speed build kits. So it's easy to do. You just want to take your time and you want to make sure that your wing is folding in the proper location. You don't want your crack to go off in a different direction. Do this one at a time, slowly curling it around. Now you can bring your wing up, holding down on your spar, establishing the next groove, and your next groove. Now this is the important part. To make a good symmetrical wing, you don't want to force it too quickly. You want to slowly bring it over, allowing the paper to stretch, and allowing the 2 spars to come down and meet as close as possible. And then you can slowly press down on the wing. You're going to come out with a beautiful symmetrical wing, just like this. Now, you can see the importance here. If this was off-centered and you line these up, you wouldn't get a nice symmetrical wing. Now that we have the wing bent into shape, our next step is to glue it together. We're going to make sure we have a hot glue gun that can supply enough hot glue without drying out too quickly. And also for this, because the wing actually tapers as it goes towards the tip, when we glue these together, we're not going to put a full bead of glue the whole way back and glue it flat. This actually is 3 pieces of foam thick. This is only 2 pieces of foam thick. That way you get a nice tapered wing going out just the way it should be. And your airfoil is very efficient that way. So we're going to put a center bead down, right down the leading edge for strength. And we're only going to go back about 2 inches. Right there. Once again, we're going to fold over our wing, and we're going to put all of our attention into lining up these 2 spars. Now, if you did this right, what you should have is roughly the same amount of lift on the leading edge. This leading edge should not be down against the building board. It should actually come together, and the center line of your 2 spars should line up at the center line of your leading edge. And go ahead and keep your pressure on this. Make sure the glue is good and dry before you release that pressure. As you can see, this portion here is not glued yet. We're going to do that second. We don't want to try to have too many glue joints to hold in alignment because since this is a symmetrical wing, a lot is very crucial on keeping this order. The glue joints we've made are nice and strong now. Our next step is to fasten down the trailing edge, and as you can see looking down in here, you can see how we only glued about 3 inches and then we let it kind of lift up so there's a general taper. Reason being, like I said, when we put this wing together for its final stage, this is going to be 3 pieces of foam thick, and this is only going to be 2, so you're going to have a nice transition in your wing. It's going to be a very complicated, complex wing, but a very simple build. Next step is going to be to fasten down the trailing edge of your wing. Now it's very crucial, as you can see, neither one of the back parts of the wing are beveled. We don't want to bevel it because you won't get a symmetrical wing then. Just simply apply a nice straight bead of glue on the very bottom of the trailing edge, close as possible. We'll lay it down on a flat building board, and now put all your concentration on that back trailing edge of your wing. Because if you cut this out perfectly, you're going to get a perfectly symmetrical wing. You don't want to push the top where the spars are perfectly flat to the building board. You want to keep the very top of the wing flat and let the spar area raise up. If you take a look at this, this should look nice and symmetrical. Even though it's at an angle, it should look nice and symmetrical now and be very true. Our next step is to install the control horns. Now these are our own control horns available in the speed build kit, but if you want to scratch build this plane but not take the time to build your control horns or to go out and buy store-bought ones, we do have this available on our store, 20 pieces in a pack. Push this down, open up that cavity that was cut by the laser. Once we're happy with that, apply a thin bead of glue down here and then press them right back in. Now with the speed build kit, these are custom cut to be exact. So when this is on the plane, these holes will be perfectly in line with the trailing edge of the wing, so you won't have any differential. Our next and final step with this wing is to install our end cap. In the past we used to leave this open, but now you can just simply take a piece of stiff poster board, this is also included in the speed build kit, and simply glue it right over the surface and trim it to shape, and that's what we're going to do right now. Now I choose to leave the matte finish of the poster board facing out. It matches very nicely with the paper. So just take note which side is the matte finish if you want to do the same. And leave that facing out. There's the matte. I like pushing it against the table here just to keep it nice and flat. There you go. Now we're going to take a sharp pair of scissors and cut the excess off. And don't try to take this in one complete bite. It's a lot easier if you just kind of nibble it off slowly. The neat thing about this also is you can go back and physically sand it. And you can use this technique on everything from the baby blender all the way forward that uses a build-up airfoil. Well friends, the right side of the wing is all done. Now all we need to do is repeat all the same steps on the left side. Before we move on to the fuselage, make sure you have your other side of your wing built. Our next step is to get our tail surfaces ready. Now to do this, it's the same process, whether speed build or laser cut. You're going to have a 50% score cut here. We're going to simply crack that open and cut our 50% bevels on the rudder side, not the fin. Once again, if you do not want to use a razor blade, you can use sandpaper for this. Being that this is a 3D airplane, make sure that you cut enough of an angle to get your throws that you want. Now if you're just getting into 3D, you don't need really extreme throws. If you're a pro at 3D and you just want something to bang around, cut it as extreme as you want. You can always chew out your tail surfaces more to give yourself more deflection. This kit does not include a throw gauge because on a 3D airplane, the throws are basically decided by you. We're going to repeat the same process on our elevator. Crack it 180 degrees, cut our bevel on our elevator side, not our stabilizer. Now if you ever want a little bit more and you don't want to take a chance across the center line, you can go back to some sandpaper. Simple piece of 220 or 120 on a little piece of plywood does wonders. Our next step is to install the control horns once again, using the same process we did on the wing. We're going to repeat the same process on the rudder, but this time make sure that you put the control horn on the paper side. This will be facing on the left. So control horn goes on the left side of the rudder. Our control surfaces are now done. Now for the fun part, move on to our fuselage. Now I just put these as reference for you, just to give you an idea of the canopy. Maybe in the future we'll have some decals for you, but what you can do is go to the plans, trace off the plans, your canopy style, and then you can put them on the outside of your plane. But just like on our power pod, we're going to go ahead and take where our 50% score cuts are, bend it back 180 degrees, and remove the paper all around these areas. So wherever you need to remove the paper, go ahead and do that step now. One thing I have done is I've left this foam here in place as much as possible, because when I squeeze the back end of the fuselage together, I don't want to crinkle this in. You can see there's very little meat there. I don't want to go ahead and crinkle that and distort that area. Same thing with the very bottom of the fuselage as well. I left those areas in place. You're going to want to make a crease with your popsicle stick. This is where your fuselage is going to bend. And you don't want to, once again, puncture the paper. You're just simply going to want to tell the foam where to bend. You don't want to have to try to stress the fuselage together. You want it to go there naturally. Do this on both sides of your fuselage. Now this fuselage is going to be assembled with a B-style fold. Now it's always labeled A-style or B-style. B-style is when the side plate goes next to the bottom plate, not over top of it like your pod. For this process, we're simply going to apply a bead of glue right on the very bottom of the fuselage. And then also, stepping up on the side cheek of the fuselage, I'm going to apply a bead of glue all the way back and down in this notch right here. Make sure you have a glue gun that keeps the temperature hot enough to allow you to do all these steps. Now we're simply going to fold up this to 90 degrees. I can even hold it there. And then take our rear of our fuselage, set it back. Once the glue starts cutting down, you can wipe off the excess and hold it right up against the very back of your fuselage. Hold this position until the glue is thoroughly dried, making sure your bottom of your fuselage is firmly against your building board and the side cheeks of your fuselage are against your triangle. We're going to repeat the same process on the second side right here. Once again, a bead of glue down in the crack, stepping up on the sides of the fuselage, putting our bead of glue there, and then down in this little gap for the very tail end. Put a lot more time into making sure the aesthetics of this plane didn't make it look like a folded together pieces of paper. So we have a lot more paper reliefs cut out to overlap and keep everything looking nice. Once you have the back pressed in, once again take your triangle, make sure you're perpendicular to the ground. Keep special mind of the back of your fuselage during this process that it doesn't come unglued and move away. Our next step is to do a B-style fold on the very top plate here, the exact same as your bottom of your fuselage, just it's on the top now. And this is where doing everything at a 90-degree angle really pays off because you get a nice perpendicular plane. Now it's important during the glue process that you don't rock this back and forth and still glue it, so we're going to keep this 90 degree close by. In this step we're going to apply a bead of glue on both sides of your fuselage, top plate, and hold the whole fuselage nice and perpendicular to the building board once again. Always keep that triangle in arm's reach. Our last step on this fuselage is one more B-style fold, doing the same process as we did in the very front. 2 beads of glue, and as you can see I left the paper in there. And this is why I left that piece of paper in there, so when we squeeze this together, we don't crinkle the paper. And we'll come back once again, making sure our fuselage is 90 degrees. Now the reason this is so important is because if our fuselage wasn't 90 degrees and it's twisted, our rudder and elevator are going to be twisted as well. Now there's a little bit of give in this where you can kind of bend the elevator and the rudder to make it match up nicely. But also considering the fact that our wings plug into this too, it's a really good idea to keep everything on the fuselage as true and straight as possible. Our next step is to install our rudder and our elevator, but before we put on the fuselage, we have to join them together. Now this is where that cut on the side comes into play. We're simply going to open this up just a little bit. We're going to slide our elevator into this gap right here, and then let it kind of seat itself up inside the fin. Now as you can see, we have this area here. We're going to simply take a piece of tape and put it back together, just to help us with alignment. Now we can leave this loose. We don't want to glue this down until we get it in our fuselage. We're simply going to take where this rudder is and use your fingers and kind of pinch this together to bring the paper together so it doesn't snag the fuselage going in. Once again on the very top here. Pinching this together will make this part much easier for you. Alright, at this point we're going to get our stabilizer lined in, slid in as much as we can. Now put your energy towards the very bottom of the fuselage. Get that seated in, and we go to the top. Just take it millimeter by millimeter, and if you did it right, it'll start sliding right in for you. Now, pull all the way forward, going back and forth between the rudder and the elevator. And you'll know you're fully seated when the elevator meets the front of its relief and the rudder line meets the front of its relief, and also lines up perfectly with the hinge line being on the very back of the fuselage line. We're going to go ahead and hold off gluing this in until our wings are installed and we can line up and make sure it's parallel with our wings. Now that our fuselage is virtually built, our next step is to let it meet up and join up with the power pod. To do this, we're going to simply take this pair of square stock. Now it's very close to being a rectangle, so make sure you have the side that's just a touch tight. And there it is right there. This is where we're going to put our alignment dowels on. So we're going to take this component here, center it up with our power pod, and as you can see, it's virtually lined up with our power pod as it is. And just like from our FT flyer all the way up to this one, same process with the twisting motion. We're going to go in about 1 inch. This really works for alignment, not so much structural. The back barbecue square is what holds the pod in. Just go about 1 inch in, flip it around, go about 1/4 of an inch out. One of the really cool methods I saw is people use wire strippers. And the wire strippers actually kind of compress the fiber so you don't get that stringy, frayed mess. We're going to put a little drop of glue. Just remember, a little drop of glue is all you need. It goes a long way in this process. I'm going to do both at one time because I want to sit this back in for alignment and make sure that I'm happy with it before it fully dries, just in case my angles are a little bit off. Once again, a twisting motion does a really great job in getting this all the way in. And just like our other builds, I like to reinsert it just to make sure I'm happy. It's always easier to go back and tweak while the glue is finalizing and drying. Our next step is to take our power pod with our little alignment plate and then go ahead and slide this in all the way back. Now, the neat thing with this having just a little bit of friction, we're going to want to take this back to the point where the rear reference holes line up. That's going to be where your bottom plate needs to stop. Now, there's going to be a little reference line on the speed build kits for this. Now, with the barbecue skewer, we're going to go ahead, once we have our holes lined up, we're going to run this through and fasten the rear part of our power pod, leaving about a 1/4 inch out on each side. And this will hold everything in alignment for our front plate. Go back and reinforce that reference mark with a little piece of pencil, just like that. Go ahead and pull out your power pod. We'll glue in your alignment plate. Now we have our pencil made reference line, and that's going to be the one we're going to go off of. Also, because every pod is different, keep in mind which surface you need to glue. So in this case, we're going to be putting our glue. We're going to go ahead and install our alignment plate back to our reference line. And then just to make sure that everything lines up perfectly, we're going to reinstall our power pod too. Once this is installed, go ahead and take a pencil and actually just mark the perimeter of your power pod. This is going to make alignment much easier when you're out in the field. This is a perfect friction fit. Maybe a little tight at first depending on how much tape you put on it, but that's why it's a little bit on the tight side. It will loosen up over time, but it'll also give you a tremendous amount of strength, much like the FT Bloody Wonder. Our next step is to take our canopy piece, once again with the 50% score cuts, or like I said, this is done with the laser, and simply remove the extra foam. And this is going to be all B-style folds as well, just like our fuselage. Simply put a bead of glue. We're going to raise up the side of the canopy up against the bottom plate. Always be very careful when you do your A-style and B-style folds to make sure you get them right. If you don't, in cases like this, you won't have a good fit. Repeat the process on this side. Bead of glue. Fold it up. Hold it 90 degrees. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on our fuselage, just like we're putting a top plate on our fuselage. 2 beads of glue, fold it over, press it down. Now would be a good time to go ahead and just do a quick test fit, and it should be nice and snug against this fuselage. Once again, I want to keep the fuselage from being able to be crushed easy. Now, if you built the foul flyer or the baby blender glue and poster board on, is kind of an art form. You want to take your time, do it right, make sure you don't have any wrinkles. Also with canopies, it's better to start one side and then roll it. It's not a bad idea before you start this. Put a piece of tape down, tape that leading edge down, and then what you can do is you can put your bead of glue down and then roll it back, but that way, as you pull this, it doesn't go anywhere. First, going to put a bead of glue on the very bottom here, and then up roughly about 1/3 of the way. Now we're going to continue this on all the way to the back. Nice healthy dispersion on the top. Lay it back over again, and with the same rocking motion, keep those lines centered. Don't twist at this point. And then push forward against that tape just to make sure everything is getting forced back against the canopy. Now that we have this done, we can take our scissors, and we're going to want to cut just about the depth of our foam relief on both sides here. This is going to give the foam or the canopy the ability to kind of key into the fuselage very nicely. And then along the back here, we're going to trim this perfectly flush. Our next step is to simply take a piece of tape, fold the very top tab over on itself so it's not sticky. Then place the rest of it on the bottom so that tab just sticks up. This is going to be the tab you pull on to pull your canopy out. After we have that done, we're going to take our supplied popsicle stick and we're going to glue it right on the very bottom with a little tab facing forward. So right down the center here. If you want to break the popsicle stick in half, you're welcome to. No need though. Should be nice and snug, just like that. put these little reference holes just to show you guys easily where I'm talking about. On the laser cut kit, this will be lined up perfectly with just a little burned in hole like you see here. But what we want to do is we're going to want to, just like the FT Flyers, go on both sides. You don't want to try to go all the way to the other side because you may not get out where you need to go. Once we have those holes made, we're going to slide this through, and this will be the way we hold down the back of our canopy. Don't skip this step, because what you're going to have is in high G maneuvers, on high speed maneuvers, this creates lift, and eventually it will fall out and you're going to have to build another one. So it's not going anywhere. Good. Now I like to use tail skids a lot just because it keeps the weight down. We're simply going to take the remaining part of our barbecue skewer. Our next step is to remove the power pod and the canopy because it's time to install the wings. We're also going to have a piece of balsa wood, and I know balsa wood seems very, very weak, but we're yet to break the wings, and Aaron even said that it'll be very difficult to break these wings. I'm going to go ahead and slide this in to the center line here, making sure that we're happy with our fit and that this is the same width that'll fit through there. And we're just going to do a quick test fit really quick before we glue everything in. Now this should be a really, really tight fit for this to go through. I don't want this to be sloppy. But if you built your fuselage and everything right, you're going to see this actually lines up at a very nice tight joint. Now this wing goes in two pieces. It's not joined in the middle because we need the area for the pod in the center. I'm happy with it. What we're going to do now is we're physically going to go ahead, and I marked this as a 10-inch piece of wood. I just marked it with pencil at 5 inches, and we're going to glue it inside this one side of the wing. So I like to use plenty of glue and almost use it as a lubricant and slide it in and get it perpendicular. Keep in mind, when you slide this in, you want to look down your wing. Make sure that it's parallel with your spars. If it goes off at an angle, by the time it gets over here, it's going to be way out of alignment for the other wing to receive it. Now that that's dry, we'll go ahead and give it one more test fit before gluing it in. This time you're probably wondering why in the world we had to cut a slot back there. This is for our popsicle stick. The back of a wing needs a way to align, so when you put your wings on, they're not tilted like huge ailerons. This is where this comes in. We're simply going to go ahead, push this through both sides, and center it up. No need to glue it in at this moment. This is going to act as an alignment. Should be a nice tight friction fit, so when this goes through, by the time it gets back here, it's going to be hitting your glue joint and getting really rigid. Just like that. You can see now there's no twisting motion, and that's going to hold it in beautifully. Now that we're happy with the fit on this one, we're going to glue it in. Lay your bead of glue right along the edge of your airfoil. Also a healthy amount on top of your spars. And I like to put a little shot of glue right down in there on the back where the popsicle stick's going to go. And while that glue's drying, we're going to snake this through, get our back lined up, and as quickly as possible, push it up against your fuselage. Now don't just set it down on the table. Hold this until it's thoroughly dry. Spend a minute of quiet time with your airplane.
Can I spend some quiet time with you in the plane?
No. So hold this down. You can also insert your hand and give it nice flat pressure, but this is going to create an incredibly strong glue joint between the fuselage and the wing. Our next step is to repeat the fitting process with the other wing. So we're going to slide this in once again. Taking our time. If you have to, you can even kind of bend these, bevel these in, pinch them just like we did with our elevator. Make it slide better. That's much better. Now would be a good time to cut this a little bit shorter here. I like to take it about 3/4 of an inch. There we go. On this design, the hole on the fuselage is just a little bit undersized to the spar itself, so it kind of compresses the foam down to make the strongest joint possible. There we go. We'll line up the back here again. And then if we did everything right, we should be able to push it on in nice and tight like that. Now would be a good time to go and inspect your fit. Make sure your wings are nice and true before gluing it in. Alright, the moment of truth has come. This is the point where there's no return. Our steps are going to be, we're going to squirt glue down in this crack to the best of our ability. Be generous because the hot glue will act as a lubricant, and in this case using a little bit more will take it a little bit longer to dry, give you more time to get everything in right. So the order I'm going to go in is I'm going to squirt the glue down in the crack, go around the perimeter, squirt it in by the back alignment popsicle stick, and then slide it in, and then immediately go to hold the wing perpendicular to the fuselage. that line, back nozzle line, we're gonna push it in nice and tight. Get that back in there, push it in. And now I'm sorry if I take it away from the camera a little bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that this wing is perpendicular or parallel with the tail, perpendicular to the rudder. Last step, once you're happy with everything, seal the deal with a thin bead of glue around the fuselage. Now it seems like there's no way that this would be strong, but we have crashed this plane so many times. Full throttle, half throttle, straight down, upside down. It may crinkle the foam, but it's gonna stay together. It's very, very rigid construction here. You're not gonna have a problem. Now, a lot of you guys are always concerned, and rightfully so, with these bigger control surfaces, a lot more stress on this hinge line, which is just paper. Chet Capper has a really cool technique, and it sounds crazy, but you actually take hot glue, put it right down in your control surface, and then immediately come back with a scrap piece of foam board and squeegee it down in there as much as you can get off as possible. You don't want any residual in that hinge line. What that'll do is it'll seal the paper and the foam, and also impregnate the paper and the foam and give it like an elastic rubber band feel. So just make sure before you do that that you have the throws that you want, because you can't go back in later and cut out a little bit more. But that'll keep that paper from stressing and ripping. Our next step is to install the servos. Our airframe is virtually built now. Now, it's always a good idea to center up your Hextronic 9-gram servos with these. Now, you can see right now the servo's all the way on the inside. When you go 3D, move it all the way to the outside. That's going to be the time when you're going to want to have those extreme throws and extreme performance. So, I'd recommend, honestly, find out what your skill level is, your comfort level, and then go ahead and put your linkage stoppers in association with that. Alright, we're going to snake this through, and won't spend a lot of time on this because just like in all of our builds from our FT Flyer up, this process is the exact same. Put a drop underneath each end, push it down, let it dry. Repeat this process of installing your servos on all 4 control surfaces. You're going to see where the control horns are, and where the servo location is going to correspond whether the control horn needs to face to the right and to the left. Now be careful with this, because if you get it backwards, you're going to have a crooked control surface, but also when you go from one swappable to the other, the controls could be reversed, and we don't want that. So go ahead and install your servos, and we'll go to the next step. Basically, when this elevator pushes up, you can see how the rod will bend. I like using really light gauge wire for weight, but if you're flying hardcore 3D and you want that locked in feeling, this needs to be more rigid. You can do that with carbon fiber, or air in solution was much more simple and I just loved it. It's actually just taking a barbecue skewer and some tape and taping it on there. Now I think he was just being resourceful with the materials that we have laying around, which are always basically materials from Dollar General. But this works incredibly well. If you want to do it ahead of time, you can also use heat shrink tubing around this as well. Lots of different techniques, but I'm just going to go ahead and tape this on just to show you how it looks. Like I said, not a necessity, but it does work pretty darn well. There we go. Now, hard as a rock. You can see there's no slop. Alright, our next step to construct the landing gear, if you have the speed build kit, just take the 15-inch supplied wire, I think roughly 2 millimeters in diameter. Bend it right at the halfway mark, which will be 7.5 inches. Just a touch over, right around 45 degrees to 90 degrees. We're then going to go roughly 2 inches, bend it straight down. Repeat the process. Landing gear shouldn't be a stressful thing. As long as you get the bends fairly close and you work out the angles afterwards, you'll be just fine. If you try to bend it perfectly, it's very difficult and frustrating. Now we'll go ahead and adjust it for toe. Want to make sure when you touch one landing gear or the other side, it doesn't physically rock up and tip. That's great. We're ready to put on our plane. With the bottom of the fuselage facing towards you, start the rubber band on the far left side. Snake it through the V mark of the landing gear. Go around the back barbecue skewer. Pull it up to the front, and then wrap it behind the landing gear all the way to your other barbecue skewer. If the rubber band's too tight, stretch it until it works, or you can even just get a longer rubber band. But this will give a remarkable round of bungee, but yet rigidity as well. Now it's time to install our wheels. Just like we've done on all our other planes, I like to use the beloved hot glue wheel collar method. If you do it right, it works amazingly well. A little dab of glue, wrap it around, makes a really nice little wheel collar. Now we can make any fast last minute adjustments. We can twist it so the wheels end up parallel and it's all ready to go. Now it's time to get our power pod in, our receiver connected, and all of our throws dialed in. Now, with 3Ds, there's some very important things, and one thing is balance. When you get to planes like this, everyone has a different feel on what they think is good balance and what they think is bad balance. It's all up to the flyer, because some people like to fly a little bit nose heavy on 3D, some people like to fly perfectly neutral, some people even go into the danger zone and go after the CG. The area I like is roughly 1/3 back from the back of the wing, and unfortunately I can't give you a laser-etched mark, but I can tell you the reference line from the very front of this servo. Just roughly right up there. That's going to be my happy area where I like to start. I'm balancing with a 1300 battery, and you can see I'm flying just a little bit nose heavy, especially for the maiden flight. Once I get through the maiden flight, I can play with that CG a little bit more. But it's a good reference to start, just straight up from where that cut is on the servo, roughly about 3/4 of an inch from the back of the spar. Well friends, the FT3D is ready for maiden, and I want to sincerely thank you for watching this episode. I want to thank you for your support through Flite Test, through our website, through the internet store, and also for buying the speed build kits. You can look for this in the near future in our store.